He had traveled farther than any human had ever gone before. The stars outside the ship's viewports stretched endlessly, glittering like diamonds scattered across a black sea. For months, he had prepared for this journey, studying every protocol, every possible argument, and every outcome. Yet nothing in all his training could have prepared him for the feeling that now settled deep in his chest, a mixture of excitement, fear, and a quiet determination that refused to be shaken. Earth had chosen him, not because he was the strongest or the most famous diplomat, but because he was the one who could carry the voice of humanity without fear. In the halls of the Galactic Council, where species from across the galaxy gathered to discuss peace, law, and trade, honesty was rare. Diplomats often bent words, twisted facts, or stayed silent when pressure built. But he had always believed in truth. And now, he would face a chamber filled with beings that had rarely looked at humans as equals. As his ship approached the council station, a massive structure floating silently in space, he couldn't help but stare at its scale. It was like nothing on Earth. Towers of shimmering metal rose hundreds of meters above the docking bay, and strange lights ran along corridors that seemed to pulse with life. Ships of all shapes and sizes hovered around it, some sleek and polished, others jagged and intimidating. The council wasn't just a place of meetings. It was a display of power, wealth, and history. Every species that had a seat there carried its legacy, and the station itself seemed to breathe with the weight of countless decisions that had shaped entire worlds. Stepping into the docking bay, he felt the eyes of dozens of alien species on him. They didn't look directly at him, not always, but there was an unmistakable curiosity, a mixture of surprise, and in some, quiet disdain. Humans were still new players in this galaxy. To some, he was a curiosity. To others, a potential threat. He adjusted the strap of his insignia across his chest, the symbol of Earth, and walked with steady steps. Every motion was deliberate. Every breath was measured. He could not allow fear to show, not now, not ever. He was guided through corridors that twisted and turned in ways that made the human eye struggle to understand them. Some sections seemed almost organic, as if the station itself had grown rather than been built. He passed beings whose shapes he could barely comprehend. One looked like a floating crystal with lights moving inside it. Another resembled a giant insect with translucent wings, and yet another had multiple faces that seemed to shift whenever he looked directly at them. He reminded himself silently that all of them were intelligent. All of them were representatives of worlds far older than Earth, and all of them were judging every move he made. Finally, he arrived at the council chamber. The doors opened slowly, revealing a space larger than any hall he had ever seen. Light bounced off walls that shimmered like liquid, and hundreds of delegates sat in concentric rings, each species occupying a section that reflected their status and influence. The air hummed with the quiet energy of anticipation. Conversations ceased as soon as he entered. Every eye or equivalent turned toward him. Some faces betrayed curiosity, some suspicion, and a few, he noticed, held something darker, almost like anger. He took a deep breath. This was the moment he had been preparing for. Years of studying galactic laws, decades of learning languages and customs, months of preparing speeches, and countless simulations had led to this single step. He knew that his words could influence the future of his planet. He also knew that a single misstep could make humans a target for generations. As he walked toward the central platform, he caught glimpses of the council leaders. Each one was more intimidating than the last. One had eyes like liquid silver, reflecting every movement in the chamber. Another's form was covered in intricate armor that seemed grown rather than forged. They were ancient, wise, and powerful. He could feel the weight of their expectations and judgments pressing down on him. Yet he reminded himself, humanity had never bowed to intimidation. When he reached the central podium, The hum of whispers filled the chamber. Alien languages swirled around him, but he didn't need to understand the words. The tone, the pauses, the energy, it all spoke clearly. They were waiting for him, testing him silently. Some were ready to dismiss him before he even spoke. Some were waiting for a reason to respect him. He straightened his shoulders and let his calm confidence show. He would not let them see doubt. The session began with formalities, introductions, and ceremonial acknowledgments. Then, without warning, the first accusation came. A representative from a well-known alien faction accused Earth of violating interstellar borders. The words hit him like a physical blow. He had known there would be tension, but he had not expected the session to start with hostility, so sharp, so public. He listened carefully, noting the details, the claims, and the subtle implications. It was clear immediately. These accusations were not based on facts. They were political maneuvers designed to isolate Earth and make it appear dangerous. He remained calm. Every diplomat had strategies for deflecting false claims, for redirecting blame, for negotiating compromise. But something about this situation felt different. The accusations were meant to provoke, to test him, to see if humanity would react with fear or aggression. If he faltered, Earth could be marked as a target. He spoke with clarity and precision. Every word was chosen carefully. He presented evidence, records, and statements from Earth officials that proved humanity had acted within its rights. He appealed to reason and fairness, hoping that some delegates would listen. Yet, time and again, his arguments were dismissed, interrupted, or ignored. He realized then that this session was not about justice. It was about power, influence, and control. Despite the mounting pressure, he refused to show frustration. He met the gaze of every delegate, speaking not only to them, but to the truth he carried for Earth. The human species had never conquered the galaxy, but it had survived, adapted, and grown. Humanity had built civilizations, explored the unknown, and faced threats without surrendering. That resilience, he realized, was his greatest argument. If they would not listen to proof, they might at least respect determination. Hours passed. The council debated in ways he had anticipated, but not fully understood, until now. Some delegates whispered behind screens, exchanging messages, consulting advisors. Some left and returned, signaling alliances forming and dissolving. He sensed a strategy being woven around him, one he could not see fully. Still, he remained steady, speaking when necessary, listening when needed, and never giving them reason to doubt humanity's resolve. By the end of the first day, he had learned something crucial. The Council did not underestimate humans because they were weak. They underestimated humans because they had never seen them respond with such calm confidence in the face of threats. The whispers, the dismissals, the sidelong glances, they all revealed one thing. Humans were unpredictable. And unpredictability, in a place ruled by centuries-old hierarchies and rigid expectations, was a kind of power. As he left the chamber that night, walking through the quiet corridors back to his ship, he allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. He was tired, yes, but also strangely exhilarated. He had faced some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy and had survived the first day without giving them reason to strike. That alone was a victory. But he knew the real challenge had just begun. The Council had shown its hand, and now humanity's fate depended not only on careful negotiation, but also on courage, strategy, and the willingness to act when words were no longer enough. He looked out of the viewport of his cabin as the Council station floated silently against the backdrop of stars. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers and opportunities alike. And somewhere within that vastness, decisions were being made that would determine Earth's future. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him, but it did not crush him. Instead, it reminded him why he was here, why he had trained, and why Earth had entrusted him with this mission. For the first time in his life, he allowed a small smile. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with obstacles and uncertainty, but he was ready. Humanity had sent its voice into the heart of the galaxy, and he would make sure it was heard, no matter what the Council said, no matter what threats loomed, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. The galaxy might not yet respect humans, but it would listen. And one day, they would understand that Earth was a force not to be underestimated. The next day, he returned to the council chamber with a sense of resolve. The corridors of the station felt strangely familiar now, but the weight of expectation pressed heavier than ever. Every step he took was measured, every movement deliberate. He knew that the accusations from the previous day would shape the council's perception of humanity, and he could not afford even a small mistake. The moment he entered the chamber, a cold hush fell over the room. He sensed eyes tracking his every motion, alien features studying him with curiosity, suspicion, and in some cases, outright hostility. The session began quickly, without much ceremony. The council representatives wasted no time in presenting their case. Screens lit up with images, charts, and data that claimed Earth had interfered in disputed regions of space, violated territorial agreements, and ignored warnings from more powerful species. He listened carefully, noting the subtle ways the accusations were framed. Each claim seemed crafted not just to question Earth's actions, but to question humanity's very right to exist in the galactic community. He felt a tight knot in his stomach. These accusations were not just political maneuvers. They were designed to provoke fear, uncertainty, and perhaps even aggression from humanity. Yet, he forced himself to remain calm. Every human emotion, every instinct to react with anger or defensiveness, he kept carefully under control. In a room filled with centuries-old civilizations, calmness was a form of power. It showed confidence, and confidence demanded respect. He responded with clear and logical arguments, presenting detailed evidence that refuted the claims one by one. Logs from Earth's space agencies, communications records, and third-party observations supported every point he made. He spoke slowly, ensuring every delegate could understand him, despite the differences in language and culture. Yet, no matter how solid his evidence, the council seemed determined to ignore it. Some delegates whispered to each other, exchanging looks that made it clear. The verdict had already been influenced by alliances and hidden agendas. Frustration began to build around him. He could sense the other species growing restless, some murmuring among themselves, others turning their attention to screens or personal devices. The diplomat reminded himself not to take it personally. This was not a judgment on him as an individual. It was a reflection of the political game in which Earth was now an unwilling player. The Council had its own rules, its own politics, and its own manipulations. Humanity was just a new variable, one they had not learned how to control. As the hours passed, he noticed a troubling pattern. Certain factions, the ones he had hoped might remain neutral or supportive, were now openly siding with the Council leaders who were attacking Earth. Whispers turned into hushed conversations, and subtle gestures passed between species that spoke volumes. They were forming alliances against humanity, even before any evidence could be fully considered. It was clear the Council had already decided Earth's place, and it was not favorable. Despite the pressure, he continued to speak with clarity and patience. He explained that Earth's exploration had always been guided by ethics, cooperation, and respect for borders. He emphasized that humans sought friendship, not conflict, and that misunderstandings could be resolved through dialogue rather than punishment. Yet every point he made seemed to be met with resistance. The more he spoke, the more obvious it became that this session was less about truth and more about control. Suddenly, an unexpected voice cut through the room. A representative from a minor faction, one that rarely spoke in council sessions, raised a question that changed the tone of the debate. They asked for proof, for verification, for a fair review of Earth's actions. The diplomat seized the opportunity, presenting additional evidence and offering to allow independent auditors to review every claim. For a moment, there was hope. Perhaps some delegates would see the truth, but hope was fleeting. The council leaders quickly regained control, dismissing the suggestion as unnecessary. They insisted that Earth had acted recklessly, and that the evidence he presented was insufficient or irrelevant. The diplomat realized then that the council's intention was not to judge fairly, it was to isolate Earth, make humanity appear guilty, and justify a future action that had likely been planned long before this meeting. He paused for a moment, looking around the chamber. He saw expressions of disbelief, concern, and curiosity. Some species were clearly listening and reconsidering their stance. Others remained fixed in rigid positions, determined to ignore anything that contradicted the narrative the council had constructed. He understood now that this was not a debate. It was a test of humanity's composure and resolve. As the session continued, more accusations emerged. One faction claimed that Earth had secretly tested advanced technologies in disputed zones. Another accused humans of influencing trade agreements on other planets without permission. The diplomat responded to each with evidence and reason, but it felt as though the council had already made up its mind. Their goal was not truth. It was control, and the diplomat understood that humanity's survival depended on navigating this carefully. Despite the frustration, he noticed something important. Not all delegates were blind to reason. A few listened attentively, taking notes, asking questions, and challenging the accusations. Their curiosity gave him hope. They represented species that valued fairness, logic, and truth over politics. If he could reach even a few of them, Earth might gain unexpected allies. He adjusted his approach slightly, addressing these delegates directly, sharing examples of humanity's peaceful missions, humanitarian efforts, and attempts to collaborate with other civilizations. Time passed, and the council session moved toward its conclusion. The atmosphere was tense, electric with anticipation. The diplomat could feel the weight of the galaxy pressing on him, a pressure that could crush even the strongest negotiator. Yet, he held steady. He reminded himself that he carried not just his own resolve, but the hopes, dreams, and survival of billions of people back on Earth. This responsibility was immense. But he would not falter. As the session ended for the day, he reflected on what he had learned. The accusations, while false, had revealed the underlying truth about the council. It was a place of power and politics, not justice. The factions within it were more concerned with maintaining control than with seeking truth. And humanity, new to this arena, was vulnerable to manipulation and deceit. He also realized something else. Earth's voice had been heard. Even if the council dismissed evidence and twisted arguments, the diplomat had shown that humans would not cower, that they were capable of reason, resilience, and courage. He had revealed a different side of humanity, one that could not be ignored or underestimated. The seeds of respect, however small, had been planted. Returning to his cabin, he allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The galaxy was vast, full of danger, intrigue, and uncertainty. The Council's attempts to control or isolate Earth were only the beginning of a much larger story. Humans were entering a world where every move would be scrutinized, every action interpreted through the lens of suspicion, and every decision could determine survival. Yet, despite the challenges, he felt a quiet determination growing within him. Humanity had survived countless crises on Earth, overcoming natural disasters, wars, and internal conflicts. The galaxy was larger, more complex, and far more dangerous. But the same principles that had guided humanity, curiosity, resilience, and courage could guide them here as well. As he looked out through the viewport at the stars stretching endlessly into space. He thought about the future. The accusations had been an attempt to provoke fear and submission. But fear would not guide humanity. Instead, reason, strategy, and determination would shape the response. The Council might try to manipulate events, but humans had a capacity for adaptation that no alien species could fully predict. He knew the path ahead would be difficult. Days of negotiations, debates, and confrontations awaited. Some factions would attempt to deceive or intimidate, while others might offer unexpected alliances. Every interaction would matter. Every word would carry weight. And through it all, he would carry Earth's voice with clarity, honesty, and courage. For now, he allowed himself a single thought. Humanity had been tested. And while the test was far from over, the response had been strong. The Council had shown its hand, and humanity had shown its resolve. The battle of influence had begun, and he was determined that Earth would not be a silent participant. Tomorrow, the Council would convene again, and he would be ready. Evidence, logic, and truth would continue to guide him. But he also knew something deeper was necessary, a recognition that words alone might not suffice, and that courage and unwavering resolve could become humanity's most powerful weapons in the galaxy. He settled in for the night, staring at the stars, thinking of Earth and the billions of lives depending on him. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with peril and deception. Yet for the first time, he felt a quiet confidence. Humanity had entered the galaxy not as a passive observer, but as an active participant. And even if the Council sought to undermine them, humans would meet the challenge head-on, guided by truth, courage, and the unshakable belief that their time in the galaxy was just beginning. The Diplomat woke early, his mind already racing with thoughts of the Council session ahead. He knew that today would be different. The tension in the chamber yesterday had been a warning, a signal that the accusations were not just political maneuvers, they were part of a much larger plan. Something had shifted behind the scenes, and he could feel it. Every interaction, every glance from the alien delegates hinted at hidden alliances, secret strategies, and a goal that had little to do with Justice. As he walked through the corridors of the station, he noticed the subtle signs of preparation. Delegates whispered in corners, screens flickered with private communications, and even the air itself seemed charged with anticipation. He realized that some factions were no longer content to merely debate. They were moving to secure an advantage, and Earth was the target. The Diplomat took a deep breath, steadying himself. He reminded himself that panic was not an option. Humanity had survived countless crises on Earth, and survival required focus, strategy, and courage. The session began quickly, and almost immediately, the Council presented new evidence. This time, it was more detailed, more specific, and more insidious. Documents, images, and recordings were displayed, all suggesting that Earth had acted in secret to manipulate interstellar politics. Some of the evidence was fabricated, others twisted, and a few were minor misunderstandings exaggerated into grave offenses. As the Diplomat examined the data, he realized the scope of the Council's plan. It was not just about accusing Earth. It was about controlling the perception of humanity across the galaxy, creating an image of a species that could be easily attacked without consequence. He felt a chill run down his spine. The implications were enormous. If the Council succeeded, humanity could be isolated, attacked, or even eliminated before it had a chance to defend itself properly. He also understood that this was a test not of evidence or argument, but of human resolve. They wanted to see whether Earth would respond with fear, hesitation, or aggression. Each reaction would be studied, analyzed, and used against them. Determined not to be manipulated, he began his response. Calm, deliberate, and precise, he dismantled each accusation with evidence and logic. He presented logs of Earth's peaceful explorations, records of diplomatic communications with neighboring systems, and proof of compliance with interstellar agreements. Every detail was backed by verifiable facts. Yet the council seemed unmoved. Some delegates whispered to each other, dismissing his evidence. Others sat silently, their expressions unreadable, as if waiting for the inevitable dot. It became clear that words alone would not be enough. The diplomat realized that the council's plan extended beyond accusations and debates. Somewhere in the shadows, a faction had already decided that Earth needed to be contained, controlled, or punished. He needed to uncover the truth, not just defend it. He began observing the delegates more closely, noting subtle gestures, coded communications, and alliances that had formed quietly. Patterns emerged, revealing that the council's leadership was united in a single objective: to manipulate the session and secure a pretext for action against Earth. Then came the moment that changed everything. In a quiet corner of the chamber, he discovered a set of documents that had been mistakenly left unguarded. They detailed a coordinated plan for a joint strike against Earth, including strategies for blockades, technological sabotage, and propaganda campaigns. It was worse than he had feared. The Council had not just accused Earth, they had planned its destruction. The diplomat felt a surge of anger, but he controlled it carefully. Rage, if displayed, could be used against him. He needed strategy, calmness, and precision now more than ever. He knew he had to confront the Council, but he also knew he could not do it recklessly. The plan had to be exposed in a way that could not be ignored or dismissed. The session continued, with new accusations and debates, while he carefully prepared his move. Each statement he made was measured, each argument carefully constructed, not just to defend Earth, but to expose the hidden betrayal. Finally, the moment arrived. Standing before the Council, he revealed the documents, presenting them as evidence of the plan against humanity. A ripple of shock spread across the chamber. Some delegates gasped, others froze, and a few tried to dismiss the revelation. The diplomat spoke calmly but firmly, explaining the significance of the documents, the coordination behind them, and the threat they posed to Earth. His voice did not waver. Every word was deliberate, every phrase chosen to convey truth and urgency. Chaos erupted. Delegates shouted, debated, and argued, their voices overlapping in confusion. The chamber, once controlled by protocol and decorum, became a storm of voices and motions. The diplomat remained composed, observing the reactions carefully. Some factions tried to defend the Council's leadership, claiming the documents were forged or taken out of context. Others hesitated, unsure of what to believe. The revelation had fractured the Council's unity, and the diplomat saw the opening he needed. He pressed further, detailing the implications of the plan and emphasizing the danger to all species if the Council's actions were allowed to proceed unchecked. He reminded them that Earth had acted with integrity, that humanity sought peace, and that manipulation and deceit threatened the stability of the entire galaxy, not just one planet. His words were not accusations, they were a warning, and the warning carried weight. For the first time, the chamber fell into a tense silence. In that silence, the diplomat sensed a shift. Some delegates, who had seemed indifferent or hostile, now regarded him with new consideration. They were realizing that the situation was more complex than they had been led to believe. The Council's leadership had acted in secret, and their plan had been exposed. Humanity, once underestimated, had shown resilience, courage, and intelligence. The diplomat understood that this moment could change the course of history, yet not everyone was swayed. A few powerful factions remained defiant, insisting that Earth's actions justified preemptive measures. They argued that the revelation of the documents did not absolve humanity of past offenses, that the planet was still a potential threat. The diplomat listened carefully, knowing that he could not allow anger or fear to cloud his judgment. He needed to respond with clarity, reason, and unwavering determination. He spoke again, addressing the entire council. His voice carried the weight of humanity's resolve. He explained that manipulation, secrecy, and preemptive strikes were dangerous for the galaxy. That trust between species was fragile, and that Earth had consistently sought cooperation. He made it clear that humans were not invaders or manipulators. They were explorers, diplomats, and peace seekers. But he also hinted at something more, a subtle warning that humanity would not be passive if attacked. The chamber erupted once more, but this time the chaos was different. It was not just anger and confusion, it was uncertainty, a recognition that the council's leadership could no longer control the narrative. Delegates whispered to each other, some openly questioning the council's actions, others exchanging cautious glances. The diplomat realized that the power balance had shifted. Earth was no longer simply defending itself. It had exposed the truth, and the council was vulnerable. Hours passed, and the session drew to a close. The diplomat had survived the day, but he knew the challenge was far from over. The council's betrayal had been revealed, but the consequences were only beginning. Factions would regroup, alliances would shift, and decisions would be made in shadows that he could not yet see. Yet he felt a quiet confidence. Humanity had shown courage, intelligence, and resilience. The seeds of respect, however fragile, had been planted. Returning to his cabin, he allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. The galaxy was vast, complex, and often hostile, but humanity had faced challenges before. The council's betrayal was a test, one that had been met with determination and clarity. The path ahead would be difficult, but he was no longer just a diplomat. He was a messenger, a protector, and a representative of a species capable of standing against even the most powerful adversaries. Looking out at the stars, he thought of Earth, of the billions of lives depending on him, and of the responsibility he carried. The revelations today had changed the game. The council could no longer underestimate humanity. The galaxy was watching, and now Earth had made its presence known. The diplomat knew that words alone would not be enough in the days to come, but for the first time, he felt the weight of possibility, the chance to secure humanity's place in a galaxy that had long ignored it, misunderstood it, or feared it as he settled in for rest. His mind raced with plans, strategies, and contingencies. The council's betrayal had been exposed, but the real challenge was only beginning. Earth's next moves would need to be precise, careful, and decisive. The diplomat felt a sense of resolve, unlike any he had known before. Humanity had been tested, and it had not faltered. The galaxy had begun to understand that Earth was not a species to be manipulated or underestimated. And in that understanding, a new chapter of history was beginning, one that would be defined by courage, truth, and the unwavering determination of a human diplomat standing against the odds. The chamber was heavy with tension as the diplomat stepped forward. The atmosphere was electric, almost unbearable. After the revelations of the previous session, the council had not regained full control. The delegates whispered among themselves, eyes darting between each other, screens flashing quietly with coded communications, and factions forming in subtle, careful movements. It was clear that yesterday's events had unsettled the balance of power. Some species were beginning to doubt the council's leadership. Others still clung stubbornly to the old ways, unwilling to see that the truth had already been exposed. The diplomat felt the weight of the moment pressing on his shoulders. Every species in the chamber was watching, waiting, measuring, and judging. The time for careful defense, for polite argument, had passed. The council had tried to manipulate, intimidate, and isolate humanity. But they had underestimated one fundamental truth. Humans were not easily cowed, and they were capable of bold action when the stakes were highest. He took a deep breath and began to speak. At first, His voice was calm, almost soft, but it carried with it the clarity of purpose and the weight of truth. He reminded the council of the principles that had guided Earth for generations: cooperation, respect, curiosity, and resilience. He spoke of humanity's peaceful missions, its efforts to understand and collaborate with other species, and its unwavering commitment to fairness in every interaction. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. Yet every word was deliberate, measured, and impossible to ignore. As he spoke, he could see subtle reactions throughout the chamber. Some delegates leaned forward, their interest piqued. Others stiffened, clearly uncomfortable with the truths being laid bare. The diplomat pressed on, describing the council's secret plan to strike against Earth, the manipulation of accusations, and the coordinated attempts to isolate and control humanity. He recounted the evidence calmly, showing the documents, explaining the details, and highlighting the hidden alliances that had sought to undermine Earth. The chamber erupted with murmurs and whispers. Factions that had appeared united yesterday now seemed uncertain, their alliances shaken. Delegates questioned each other quietly, checking their own records, exchanging rapid communications. The diplomat realized that this was the moment he had been waiting for. The truth had the power to disrupt centuries of control, and he was its messenger. He paused, letting the weight of the situation sink in. Silence fell over the chamber, heavy and expectant. Every eye or equivalent was fixed on him. The time for subtlety had passed. Humanity's voice had been heard, but now it needed to make a declaration, one that would leave no room for doubt or dismissal. With calm but unwavering determination, he delivered words that stunned the chamber. He spoke not as an individual, not as a lone diplomat, but as the representative of an entire species that would not bow to manipulation, deceit, or intimidation. He told the council that Earth had always sought peace, that humans had acted with integrity and honor, and that the attempts to portray them as a threat were baseless and dangerous. And then, with a quiet authority that carried across the room, he said the words that no one expected: "The time for war has arrived." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Some delegates froze, their expressions a mixture of shock and disbelief. Others whispered urgently to one another, trying to process what had just been said. The council leaders themselves appeared momentarily stunned, as if the declaration had cracked the very foundation of their authority. For a moment, the room was silent, the weight of the words pressing down on everyone present. The diplomat did not pause. He continued, explaining that humanity did not seek conflict, but neither would it accept deceit, betrayal, or threats to its survival. He reminded the council that actions, not words alone, would determine the future. Every species, every faction, and every leader had a choice: acknowledge the truth, pursue cooperation, or face the consequences of underestimating humanity. As he spoke, the room seemed to shift. Some delegates began to nod subtly, recognizing the courage, logic, and clarity of his words. Others stiffened, realizing that the position they had assumed yesterday, that of unquestioned authority, was no longer secure. The diplomat had done more than defend Earth. He had reshaped the narrative, exposing not only the council's betrayal, but also the power of a species that refused to be silenced. Minutes stretched, but the diplomat's voice remained steady. He spoke of humanity's history of resilience, of the countless times humans had faced impossible odds and emerged stronger. He reminded them that strength was not measured by size, technology, or age alone, but by the courage to act with integrity and conviction when it mattered most. He urged the council to consider the long-term consequences of betrayal, manipulation, and secret agendas, warning that trust, once broken, was difficult to repair. He could feel the chamber shifting beneath him. Delegates who had been hostile or indifferent now listened with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Those who had sought to isolate Earth began to sense the risk in underestimating a species that had spoken so boldly, so clearly, and with such unwavering resolve. The diplomat realized that this was a turning point. The council had been shaken, its authority challenged not by force, but by the courage and clarity of a single human voice. Then came a subtle but powerful change. Some factions, previously aligned with the council's leadership, began to question their position openly. They spoke quietly, sharing doubts, reassessing the evidence, and reconsidering alliances. The diplomat observed carefully, noting every movement, every expression, every hesitation. Humanity's message was spreading, and the ripple effect was growing. The chamber was no longer united against him. Uncertainty had begun to take root, and with it, opportunity. The diplomat paused again, letting the tension hang in the air. He could see that some of the most powerful species were weighing their options, calculating risk, and recognizing that the old strategies of intimidation and secrecy might no longer succeed. He spoke again, reminding them that Earth did not seek domination, only survival and respect. He emphasized that humanity had always acted with fairness, and that any attempt to control or harm Earth would be met with consequences they could not predict. As he concluded his address, the chamber was almost unrecognizable from the one he had entered hours before. Whispers had replaced murmurs, alliances had begun to shift, and the council leaders themselves appeared uneasy, unsure of how to respond. Humanity had not only defended itself, it had commanded attention, forced reflection, and demonstrated strength in a way that few had expected. The diplomat stepped back, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him. He had spoken the truth, exposed the betrayal, and issued a warning that could not be ignored. The council had been stunned, and the chamber had shifted. The path ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time, humanity's voice had been heard in a way that demanded respect. Leaving the podium, he knew that this was only the beginning. The session would continue in the coming days. Debates would resume, and the council would attempt to regain control. But the balance had changed. Delegates had seen the courage, clarity, and resolve of a species that refused to be silenced. The diplomat had done more than speak. He had altered the perception of Earth across the galaxy. Back in his cabin, he allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The stars outside shimmered like a promise, and he felt the weight of responsibility more acutely than ever. The declaration of war had not been a threat, but a statement of readiness, a signal that humanity would not be passive in the face of betrayal. The council had been forced to see humans differently, and the ripple effects would reach far beyond the walls of the chamber. He thought of Earth, of the billions of lives depending on him, and of the delicate balance between diplomacy and action. Humanity had taken a stand, not through force alone, but through courage, intelligence, and unwavering conviction. The galaxy had been warned, and now it would watch. Every species, every faction, every leader would have to consider the strength, resolve, and unpredictability of humans. For the first time, he felt a deep, steady confidence. The council had been stunned, but humanity had not stopped. Words had become power, and truth had become a weapon. The diplomat knew the days ahead would be challenging, filled with negotiation, strategy, and confrontation. Yet for the first time, he felt that humanity had made its mark on the galaxy, not as a passive observer, but as an active, formidable participant. As he gazed out at the endless expanse of stars, he understood that the time for words alone had ended. Humanity had spoken, and now it was ready to act. The galaxy would never forget the moment when a human diplomat stood before the most powerful council in existence and declared, with unwavering certainty, that the time for war had arrived. The diplomat returned to his ship, his mind still buzzing from the events in the council chamber. The words he had spoken, the declaration that the time for war had arrived, echoed in his mind. He knew their impact would not be immediate, But the galaxy would not soon forget them. As the engines hummed quietly beneath him, he thought of Earth, the planet he represented, and the billions of lives depending on the decisions he had made. He had spoken boldly, but now he had to prepare for what might come next. As he landed back on Earth, he was greeted not by fanfare or ceremony, but by the quiet intensity of people who understood the stakes. Leaders, scientists, military strategists, and intelligence officers awaited his return, all eager for the first-hand account of the council session and the revelations he had uncovered. The room was filled with a mix of curiosity, tension, and determination. The diplomat briefed them carefully, explaining the evidence of the council's secret plan, the manipulation of accusations, and the alliances formed to isolate Earth. Every word he spoke was met with measured reactions. Some leaders frowned, already calculating possible scenarios and responses. Others listened quietly, absorbing the details and weighing their implications. He knew that fear could paralyze decision-making, so he focused on clarity, logic, and calm determination. Humanity had survived crises on Earth far worse than any interstellar politics. This was only another challenge, albeit on a far larger scale. Immediately, Earth's defense networks began to shift into higher alert. Fleets were repositioned, communications were secured, and advanced technologies, some kept hidden for decades, were prepared for deployment. Scientists reviewed contingency plans, engineers tested systems, and strategists ran simulations of possible scenarios. Every corner of the planet, every team responsible for humanity's protection, moved with quiet urgency. The diplomat oversaw these preparations, coordinating between divisions, ensuring that every decision was informed by accurate information and careful judgment. Despite the tension, he remained a calm presence. Humans looked to him not only for guidance, but also for reassurance. His role had evolved from diplomat to strategist, a bridge between negotiation and action. He reminded Earth's leaders that humanity did not seek conflict, but survival required readiness. Every precaution, every maneuver, every strategy was designed not to provoke, but to protect. Meanwhile, messages from the Council and other species began to arrive. Some were cautious, testing the waters, seeking clarification or reassurance. Others were overtly hostile, echoing the accusations made during the sessions. The diplomat and Earth's leadership analyzed each communication carefully. They knew that deception and manipulation were as dangerous as direct confrontation. Every message was a puzzle, a piece of a larger interstellar game that demanded careful attention and strategic thinking. As days passed, Earth's position began to shift in subtle but significant ways. Some alien factions, previously aligned with the Council's aggressive stance, approached Earth privately. They offered cautious cooperation, sharing intelligence and proposing discussions that bypassed the Council's control. These interactions were delicate, requiring careful negotiation to avoid appearing weak or desperate. The diplomat guided these discussions, balancing openness with vigilance. He knew that trust in the galaxy was fragile, easily broken by a single misstep. At the same time, Earth began strengthening alliances with species that had previously been distant or neutral. Diplomatic channels were expanded, trade agreements were revised to include strategic considerations, and collaborative projects were initiated to demonstrate goodwill and competence. Humanity had learned a vital lesson. Survival in the galaxy required both strength and diplomacy. The planet could not rely solely on its defenses or its technology. It needed allies, credibility, and a reputation for integrity. Yet, beneath the strategic moves and careful diplomacy, the reality of the potential conflict weighed heavily on everyone. Scientists worked late into the night, running simulations and stress tests. Military teams trained tirelessly, preparing for scenarios that could be catastrophic. The diplomat walked among them, offering guidance, listening to concerns, and ensuring that morale remained high. He knew that fear could spread quickly, but so could determination and confidence. Humanity's strength lay not only in its technology, but in its unity and resilience. In the council chamber, the ripple effects of his declaration were beginning to be felt. Delegates debated internally, questioning their positions and reassessing the wisdom of previous decisions. Some factions were now hesitant to push forward with aggressive measures against Earth, fearing the consequences of underestimating a species that had shown such clarity, courage, and resolve. The Diplomat monitored these developments through secure channels, understanding that the perception of strength could be as powerful as strength itself. He also recognized that humanity had to prepare for the worst. The Council might regroup, alliances could shift unpredictably, and some factions might still pursue aggressive action. Earth's leadership held emergency meetings, revising protocols, strengthening defenses, and ensuring that every branch of government, military, and intelligence was coordinated. The Diplomat contributed not only his knowledge of interstellar politics, but also his understanding of human psychology. He knew that calm, decisive action could prevent panic and maintain confidence, even in the face of uncertainty. Throughout it all, he remained acutely aware of the responsibility he bore. Every decision, every word, and every action could influence the outcome. The Council had attempted to isolate humanity, but he had changed the perception of Earth across the galaxy. Now, humanity had to act strategically, balancing diplomacy, preparation, and readiness. The stakes were higher than ever, and the margin for error was slim. Despite the pressure, he found moments to reflect on the progress humanity had made. The planet had mobilized quickly and effectively, demonstrating resilience and coordination that few species could match. Scientists and engineers worked together seamlessly. Military units trained rigorously, and leaders collaborated with unity and foresight. Humanity had turned potential vulnerability into a source of strength, showing the galaxy that it could face threats not with fear, but with intelligence and resolve. The Diplomat also understood the importance of communication. Earth needed to maintain clear channels with both allies and neutral parties. Messages were sent to species that had previously been distant or indifferent, emphasizing transparency, integrity, and the desire for cooperation. These communications were carefully crafted, balancing honesty with strategic considerations, and demonstrating that humanity's strength was matched by wisdom. As weeks passed, Earth's preparations began to show results. Some factions that had been aggressive or skeptical now approached cautiously, seeking dialogue rather than confrontation. Others remained defiant, but their attempts at manipulation were met with careful, measured responses. Humanity's position in the galaxy was no longer that of a newcomer to be tested. It was now a species to be respected, carefully watched, and cautiously approached. Yet, the Diplomat knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, complex, and unpredictable. Alliances could shift, threats could emerge suddenly, and the Council might attempt to regain control. Every day required vigilance, strategic thinking, and unwavering resolve. The Diplomat worked tirelessly, coordinating between Earth's leadership, intelligence networks, and interstellar allies, ensuring that the planet was ready for whatever might come next. He also took time to engage with those who would carry out Earth's plans. Scientists, engineers, pilots, and strategists all looked to him for guidance and reassurance. He spoke not only of tactics and protocols, but also of values and principles. Humanity's strength was not just its technology or strategy. It was its courage, intelligence, and determination to act with integrity. He reminded them that unity and confidence would be their greatest assets in the uncertain days ahead. Amid the preparations, he also considered the broader implications of the situation. The Council's betrayal had revealed weaknesses in the interstellar system, but it had also shown that truth, courage, and clear communication could shift perceptions and influence outcomes. Humanity had learned a critical lesson. Survival in the galaxy required not only strength and readiness, but also strategic thinking, alliances, and the ability to assert itself without provoking unnecessary conflict. As Earth continued to prepare, the Diplomat looked out at the stars, imagining the countless civilizations watching, calculating, and responding to humanity's actions. The galaxy was vast, filled with both allies and adversaries, opportunities and dangers. But humanity had made its presence known, and the Diplomat felt a quiet confidence. The planet was ready, not only to defend itself, but to shape its destiny with intelligence, courage, and strategic foresight. The time for preparation, strategy, and diplomacy had begun. The Diplomat knew that the coming days would test humanity in ways never before imagined. The Council had been shaken. Earth had been revealed as a capable and determined species, and the ripple effects of his actions were spreading across the galaxy. But the path ahead would be challenging, requiring constant vigilance, careful planning, and unwavering resolve. In that the Diplomat returned to the Council station, not as a passive observer, but as a representative of a species that had shown its strength, intelligence, and courage. Earth had prepared, alliances had been formed, and the galaxy was beginning to recognize that humanity was no longer a newcomer to be underestimated. Yet the Diplomat knew the true challenge had only just begun. The Council and its allies were watching closely, and any misstep could trigger conflict on a scale that Earth had never faced. As he entered the chamber, the atmosphere was tense. Delegates whispered among themselves, exchanging glances, reassessing their positions. Some had been impressed by the revelations of the previous sessions, while others were determined to maintain the old order. The Diplomat could feel the weight of every eye on him, every calculation, and every strategy being formed in real time. He was acutely aware that his next words and actions could shape the course of history. The session began with accusations, as expected. The Council attempted to regain control, presenting new claims that Earth had acted provocatively, that the disclosure of their secret plan had undermined stability, and that humanity's rapid preparations were a threat. The Diplomat listened carefully, analyzing every word, every gesture, every implication. He had learned that the Council's power lay not only in its authority, but in its ability to manipulate perception. His task now was to counter this with clarity, truth, and undeniable evidence. He presented detailed reports of Earth's defensive measures, explaining that every action had been precautionary, not aggressive. He showed communications with allies, demonstrating that humanity had reached out to other species for cooperation and consultation. Every chart, every log, and every document reinforced a single truth. Earth did not seek war, but it would not be caught unprepared. The Diplomat spoke with calm authority, his words measured, deliberate, and impossible to misinterpret. The chamber shifted subtly. Some delegates began to question the Council's narrative. The evidence of Earth's transparency and caution was compelling. The Diplomat observed reactions carefully, noting which species were receptive to logic, which were swayed by morality, and which remained loyal to old alliances. This understanding would be vital in the coming negotiations, as the balance of influence in the galaxy was as delicate as ever. Then came the moment he had been preparing for. Rising to the full weight of his authority, the Diplomat delivered a statement that would be remembered across the galaxy. Humanity does not seek conquest. Humanity does not seek domination. But humanity will not be deceived, manipulated, or threatened. The time for passive diplomacy has passed. The time for vigilance, readiness, and decisive action has arrived. We will defend ourselves. We will protect our planet and our people. And we will ensure that the galaxy understands that humanity is a species that must be respected, not underestimated. A stunned silence followed. Delegates exchanged rapid communications. their reactions ranging from shock to concern. The council leaders, who had sought to dominate the narrative, now found themselves reacting to a species that had not only defended itself, but had altered the entire balance of perception in the chamber. Humanity's voice had become a force that could not be ignored. The diplomat continued, outlining humanity's expectations for interstellar conduct. He emphasized that deception, betrayal, or preemptive action against Earth would be met with consequences that were not threats, but guarantees. He described the frameworks of alliances, defensive measures, and coordinated strategies that Earth had established. Every point was designed to demonstrate that humans were strategic, capable, and prepared, yet still willing to seek peace and cooperation. As the hours passed, the chamber buzzed with tension and uncertainty. Some factions, previously aligned with aggressive measures, now approached cautiously, seeking dialogue and clarification. Others maintained hostility, but their attempts to intimidate were met with calm, precise responses. The diplomat had reshaped the dynamic. The council could no longer manipulate the narrative without resistance. Humanity had become an active player, respected for its clarity, courage, and strategic thinking. Back on Earth, preparations continued. The planet's defense systems were fully operational, and fleets were positioned strategically across space. Intelligence networks monitored council communications and interstellar activities. Scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to ensure that humanity's capabilities remained at the highest level. The diplomat coordinated every effort, ensuring that every decision was informed by accurate data, strategic foresight, and the principles of ethical action. Despite the tension and constant vigilance, there were moments of human connection that reminded him why he had taken on this responsibility. Pilots shared stories of training exercises. Engineers discussed breakthroughs in technology, and leaders collaborated with unity and purpose. Humanity was more than strategy and preparation. It was the collective will, intelligence, and courage of billions of people working together for survival and the chance to shape their future. Weeks passed, and the galaxy began to respond. Some species, previously indifferent or hostile, approached Earth with proposals for collaboration. Trade, research, and intelligence sharing increased as the realization grew that humanity was not only capable of defending itself, but also a valuable partner. The diplomat facilitated these interactions, ensuring that Earth's intentions were clear, that agreements were fair, and that alliances were strong. Humanity had learned that diplomacy, transparency, and strategic action were inseparable tools for survival in the galaxy. The Council, however, remained divided. Some leaders sought to regain influence through manipulation and intimidation, while others questioned the wisdom of continued hostility. The diplomat monitored these dynamics carefully. He knew that perception was as powerful as reality, and that humanity's reputation for integrity, courage, and strategic thinking could influence decisions in ways that direct confrontation could not. In private meetings with Earth's leadership, the diplomat emphasized the importance of balance. Readiness and strength were essential, but so was diplomacy, intelligence, and restraint. Humanity's power lay not only in its capabilities, but in its judgment, clarity, and ability to act decisively when necessary. He reminded them that the goal was not conquest, but survival and respect, ensuring that Earth could exist and thrive in a galaxy that had once sought to control or eliminate it. As months passed, humanity began to establish a new presence in interstellar politics. Communication channels were strengthened, alliances were formalized, and Earth became recognized as a species that could not be ignored. Delegates who had doubted humanity's resolve now approached with respect. The diplomat continued to guide Earth's strategy, balancing caution with assertiveness, preparation with diplomacy, and readiness with ethical action. Finally, the moment arrived when humanity could act with confidence, knowing that the galaxy understood its capabilities, intentions, and resolve. The diplomat addressed the council once more, summarizing Earth's position, its readiness, and its willingness to pursue peace, but also defend itself if necessary. His words carried the weight of experience, strategy, and the unwavering determination of a species that had faced betrayal and emerged stronger. The council listened, some with reluctant respect, others with cautious calculation. Humanity had shown that it could not be manipulated, underestimated, or ignored. The diplomat's declaration, once shocking, had become a reality that the galaxy now had to reckon with. Earth had claimed its place not through conquest, but through courage, intelligence, and unwavering resolve. As the diplomat left the chamber, he looked out at the stars, imagining the countless civilizations watching, calculating, and responding to humanity's actions. The galaxy was vast, unpredictable, and often dangerous, but humanity had demonstrated its strength, its wisdom, and its courage. The time for passive diplomacy had ended. The time for strategic action, readiness, and engagement had begun. Back on Earth, the diplomat reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Humanity had faced deception, betrayal, and threats that could have destroyed them. Yet, through courage, intelligence, and unity, they had survived and established their presence in the galaxy. The lessons were clear. Survival required preparation, alliances, strategic thinking, and the willingness to act decisively. Words alone were not enough. Action, backed by clarity and integrity, was essential. As night fell across the planet, he felt a sense of quiet accomplishment. Humanity had endured the Council's betrayal, responded with courage, and emerged stronger and more respected than ever. The stars outside shimmered with possibility, and he knew that the galaxy had been forever changed by the presence, actions, and determination of humans. The diplomat understood that the path ahead would remain challenging, but Earth was ready. Humanity had spoken, acted, and prepared. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape. For the first time, he allowed himself a moment of peace. The galaxy had been tested, humanity had proven its strength, and the diplomat had fulfilled his role. The time for war had been declared, but it was not a reckless threat. It was a promise of readiness, a statement of courage, and a declaration that humanity would no longer be underestimated. The stars stretched endlessly,